Dune's got heroes, it's got religion, it's got psychedelic drugs. What isn't there to love about Frank Herbert's Dune novel published in 1965? Today I will summarize the plot of Dune and then review this classic sci-fi novel. Spoilers ahead. Dune takes place on the desert planet Arrakis, a desert planet containing the spice drug melange, a drug that brings its users prescient vision, fully blue eyes, extended lifespan, and an addiction. Multiple factions in the Dune universe use melange for its properties. For example, guild navigators use melange to chart safe courses across the universe, facilitating interstellar travel. The main story revolves around Paul Atreides, the son of Duke Leto Atreides and concubine Jessica. Other characters such as Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, Gurney Halleck, Duncan Idaho, Thufir Hawat, and many more populate the universe of Dune. Jessica, Paul's mother, is trained by the Bene Gesserit, a secret underground organization of women. The Bene Gesserit pull the strings behind some of the most powerful people in the universe. Their talents include the ability to change their own body's chemistry to resist poisons or change the sex of children in the womb. They are also trained in the Weirding Way, a special martial art. Paul starts the story being tested by a Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother, Gaius Helen Mohiam. Reverend Mothers, changed by the Water of Life, a drink infused with the spice drug melange, gain the knowledge of previous Reverend Mothers and access to prescient vision. The Emperor Shaddam IV's personal truthsayer is Mohiam. Paul's test by the Reverend Mother is one of pain. Mohiam states that animals trapped will gnaw through their own arms to escape pain. However, humans can endure pain despite the reflex to avoid it. If Paul cannot pass the test of humanity, he will be struck in the neck with a gom jabbar, a poison needle. If Paul fails the test, he will be killed. After sticking his hand into a nerve induction box, an itch begins on his hand, building up into an intense burning sensation. Paul passes the test while receiving the most pain ever witnessed by a Reverend Mother. Soon after Paul's test, we find that the Atreides, by order of the Emperor Shaddam, will now take over the planet Arrakis, previously run by the Harkonnens. The Harkonnens are the nemesis of House Atreides. Run by the Baron Vladimir, an overweight psychopath bent on destroying the Atreides, the Baron lacks self-control and constantly indulges in food and sex. The Harkonnens have a plot to destroy the Atreides family and reclaim Arrakis. The spice on Arrakis being a necessary part of space travel and vital for Reverend Mother's true sense makes spice highly valuable. The Chahome Company, one in which multiple houses in Dune own shares of, is extremely profitable. The Harkonnens, having amassed a great fortune, have no wish to surrender that control. In collusion with the Harkonnen plot, the Emperor Shaddam IV himself collaborates to destroy the Atreides for fear of their power. Atreides rule by the coin of love, and with thorough training of troops by Duncan Idaho and Gurney Halleck, the Atreides have potentially made a force of troops strong enough to rival the Emperor's Sardaukar, a group of soldier fanatics who train on the difficult prison planet Salusa Secundus. With the Harkonnens' plan and the Emperor's fear, the plot to destroy the Atreides grows. The Atreides, with the help of the Mentat Thufir Hawat, expect Harkonnen trickery and face challenges on their new planet Arrakis. Paul nearly escapes death by a hunter-seeker, a tiny flying poison needle able to pierce the body of its target and destroy vital organs. The Atreides also discover that the majority of the spice mining machines, ornithopters, and other equipment have been removed by the Harkonnens, leaving the Atreides with barely enough equipment to start spice mining. If the Atreides do not quickly begin making profits rivaling the Harkonnens, the Chahome Company and its many investors will be greatly angered at House Atreides. The Atreides try to use the Fremen as allies and expand their battle force. The philosophy behind this decision is that Arrakis is a harsh planet, similar to Salusa Secundus and its difficulties. The Fremen are adapted to the environment and after years of fighting against the Harkonnens have become strong fighters. The Harkonnens believe that the Fremen are a small force of maybe 10,000 to 20,000 people. The Atreides estimate a much larger community of people hiding within the desert. Before the Atreides can welcome the Fremen into their fighting force, the Harkonnens launch a surprise attack. Dr. Yue, a Sook Imperial doctor, betrays House Atreides when his wife, Wana Marcus, a Bene Gesserit, is captured and tortured by the Harkonnens. The Harkonnens promise Dr. Yue that they will return Wana as long as he turns off the Atreides shield generators and gives Duke Leto to the Baron. Through secret messages, the Atreides were warned of a traitor. To misdirect suspicions, the Atreides made a fake operation suspecting Jessica as the traitor. The Atreides failed to find the traitor and never suspect Dr. Yue, as Imperial conditioning has previously never failed. Duke Leto initiates his plan against the House Atreides. Duke Leto is captured by Yue. However, before Yue gives Leto to the Harkonnens, he places a poison tooth within Leto's mouth, stating that if Leto chooses his moment wisely, he can kill the Baron and remove himself from any potential torture. He also takes the signet ring of House Atreides from Leto and promises to return it to his son Paul. Meanwhile, Paul and Jessica are both captured. The Atreides troops falter after facing 5 legions of Sardaukar and Harkonnen troops. The Harkonnens, using artillery, block the Atreides troops within a cave system. After witnessing the impressive power of a small troop of Fremen, Mentat Thufir Hawat is captured as well. Niue makes a daring run into the Ornithopter, hiding the signet ring, a note, and still suits for Paul and Jessica. Fearing the Emperor's truthsayer, the Baron wishes to not directly kill the Atreides line, but instead wishes to drop them off into the desert, where they will either die from the harsh desert or by sandworms. Paul and Jessica escape the Harkonnen attempt to kill them. They find the stillsuit's ring and note left by Yue. Astonished by Yue's betrayal, they have no time and run away from the Ornithopter and set up an underground tent. Within the tent is spice, and Paul begins to go through revelation. He begins to unlock more of his prescience. Sensing the lives killed in his name, Paul begins to panic and blames Jessica for making him into this. Duke Leto gets interrogated by the Baron and his mentat Peter de Vries. Peter de Vries is a twisted mentat who enjoys torture and has devised multiple new poisons for the Baron. During the interrogation, Leto crushes down on the poison tooth, releasing the gas, killing everyone in the room except the Baron, who narrowly escapes around a corner. Jessica and Paul, with their abilities, feel the Duke's death. Duncan Idaho steals a Harkonnen ornithopter and begins seeking Paul and Jessica in the desert. However, before finding Paul and Jessica, Duncan picks up Liet Kynes. Yue placed a tracker within their equipment, allowing Duncan to find them easier. After finding Paul and Jessica, Liet Kynes leads them to a Fremen safe house. Liet Kynes, the Judge of the Change and the son of Perdo Kynes, a famous Dune planetologist, holds sway among the Fremen. Some offworlders describe him as having gone native. Liet Kynes sways the Fremen to accept Paul and Jessica into their places of hiding and protect them. The safe house is an Imperial ecological testing station converted to hold Fremen. Paul begins to discuss his plan with Liet Kynes and Jessica, stating he will gather evidence of the Sardaukar helping the Harkonnens and threaten to expose the Emperor's treachery to the Landsraad, a body representing all the Great Houses, and cause war between the Great Houses and the Imperium. However, Paul will offer the Emperor an alternative. If Paul can wed the Emperor's oldest daughter, he will secure himself for the throne and prevent war. But in order to succeed in his mission, he needs the Fremen's help, and offers Liet Kynes to turn Arrakis into a more hospitable planet for their assistance. However, before the agreement can be finalized, an attack begins at the ecological testing station by the Sardaukar. Duncan Idaho, on guard outside the door, fights off as many Sardaukar as he can before being killed. Liet Kynes leads Paul and Jessica through a secret door to an ornithopter. Liet Kynes stays behind, saying that he will see them again. Paul and Jessica get into the ornithopter and leave the ecological testing site. Jessica and Paul flee the Sardaukar in their ornithopter by going through a desert storm. Dust storms on Arrakis are known to cut through metal. However, Paul and Jessica fly above the densest part of the storm and manage to fly through it safely. The ornithopter lands near a rocky zone, and Paul and Jessica begin searching for the Fremen. Liet Kynes dies after being dropped off into the desert by the Sardaukar with no stillsuit. He dies in a pre-spice mass after hallucinating a conversation with his father, Perdo Kynes. Gurney Halleck survives and meets up with the smuggler and joins their group, hoping to someday get revenge on the Harkonnens. Paul and Jessica make their way through the desert, barely surviving an encounter with a worm and almost losing their backpack of supplies. They make it to a rocky position before being found by a group of Fremen. The Fremen wish to take Paul and Jessica's water and move on as daylight is almost arriving. However, Stilgar, the leader of this group of Fremen, tells them that Paul is the person Liet Kynes asked them to help. Paul is still young and would be able to learn the ways of the desert. However, Stilgar says Jessica is too old and will not be able to adapt to the desert. Paul's mother, Jessica, skirmishes with Stilgar and wins. Stilgar apologizes and tells Jessica and Paul that he will take her to Sietch Tabr. After arriving at a safe place, Stilgar suggests Jessica to be the tribe's new Reverend Mother as the previous one is dying. This act will help her find a place within their society. Jameis, who took trouble with Paul and Jessica, challenges Paul to a duel. Paul is squeamish at first, not wanting to kill Jameis, however Paul eventually kills him. The tribe takes Jameis away to extract water from him. They give the water to Paul at the funeral ceremony. Paul is also gifted Jameis' ballet set and plays a love song. This concerns Jessica as she doesn't want him to fall in love with Chani. Meanwhile, on the Harkonnen homeworld Gadi Prime, Foyd Ratha Harkonnen prepares to battle in the gladiatorial arena. Mentat Thufir Hawat plans the scheme so that the opponent is not drugged, but instead has an implemented word that will freeze the opponent. The opponent is a former Atreides soldier. Foyd Ratha is threatened for a moment before killing the gladiator with assistance from the safe word. Thufir Hawat does not want to work for the Harkonnens, but has been implanted with a poison, and if he does not receive the antidote in his food, then he will soon die a few days after escaping. Paul and Jessica arrive at Sietch Tabr with Stilgar. Paul meets Hera, Jameis' wife, and their two sons. He is now obligated to take care of the family by Fremen law. Jessica is invited to perform the ritual to become a Reverend Mother. The previous Reverend Mother arrives and they prepare the water of life that will transform Jessica. Chani scoops the water of life into Jessica and she begins the journey. She first transformed the poison into a safe substance. When her lips touch the water sac, the chemical transformation affects the whole substance. During the journey, she sees a hallway of past Reverend Mothers. She sees a black spot that she cannot go to. This spot terrifies her. She also receives all the information about the past Reverend Mother's life and knowledge. However, Jessica has a major problem. She is pregnant while transforming. Her unborn daughter also experiences the transformation. Jessica senses the fear of the child and tries to comfort it by reciting the litany of fear. Eventually, Jessica radiates love and gets the baby to calm down. After Jessica's experience, she allows the Fremen to drink from the changed water of life, allowing the Fremen to have an orgy and bond before going into consecutive battles. Paul also ingests from the water of life and gains a connection to Chani during the experience and gains further prescience. 2 years pass after Jessica's transformation. A slave boy tries to kill Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. The Baron suspects Void Ratha is behind the plot. He immediately kills the boy and the guards, suspecting their involvement. The Baron talks to Void Ratha about the assassination attempt and tells him that he will step down from the throne and give power to Void Ratha. However, the Baron tells Void Ratha that there are things he should know before he takes the throne and that the Baron can teach Void his techniques for ruling, giving Void Ratha a reason to keep the Baron around. On Arrakis, Rabban, the Baron's nephew, has been ruling ruthlessly. Dufur Hawat suggests to the Baron to stop sending any aid to Rabban and communicate to him that he needs to increase spice production, hopefully leading to more subjugation on Arrakis and leading to an even harsher planet, hopefully making a perfect place to make better soldiers. Paul has been recognized as a religious prophet by the Fremen. He has a guard of the Fedaykin, Death Commandos, who follow him and risk their lives protecting Paul. Paul and Chani give birth to Leto Atreides, and Jessica gives birth to Aaliyah. Aaliyah is an oddity to the Fremen. She can speak at the age of 2 years old and knows things that someone her age cannot have learned. Jessica is living in the southern regions of Arrakis in safe siege warrens. Jessica learns that some Fremen plan to rush Paul into fighting Stilgar for command of the Fremen. For Paul, however, he is trying to ride a sandworm for the first time. Using a thumper to attract the worm, Paul successfully rides the sandworm. Stilgar and Paul discuss the plan to have them duel for leadership. Paul does not wish to lose an excellent leader such as Stilgar, however, Stilgar is willing to give his life for the good of the tribe. The talk subsides and Stilgar suggests they take up camp for the night when suddenly they hear a smuggler ornithopter nearby. Paul decides to attack the operation to warn other smugglers to not go this far south. Paul and the Fremen attack the smuggler operation and succeed in the battle. They find Gurney Halleck is behind the operation. They have a pleasant reunion and he invites Gurney to help him fight the Harkonnens. Paul takes Gurney and a few smugglers back to the Fremen hideout and suddenly some of the smugglers who were actually Sardaukar attack Paul. They fail and Paul leaves the Sardaukar captain alive to tell the Harkonnens and the Emperor the power of the Fremen. Paul holds a speech for a mass of Fremen stating that he would be foolish to kill Stilgar, someone who is such a talented leader, and that as a religious leader of the Fremen and the Duke of Arrakis, he personally holds a different position than Stilgar and is in charge of the whole planet, thus allowing Stilgar to lead the Fremen. Paul leads Halleck to Jessica. Halleck, having believed that Jessica was the one who betrayed House Atreides, attempts to kill Jessica. However, Paul intervenes and tells Gurney that Jessica was not responsible and that Dr. Yue was the betrayer, and that further south there is a note proving the treachery. Halleck relents and in end shame asks Paul to kill him. Paul rejects and asks Gurney Halleck to play a song on the Balisat instead. Chani gets summoned south by Jessica. Paul has suddenly entered a 3-week coma. Chani and Jessica investigate and find that Paul has taken the Water of Life ritual. Paul wakes up and describes seeing the life force as one that gives and one that takes and states he is able to balance these two forces. Paul also states that he has seen a fleet of guild ships overhead holding Harkonnen and Sardaukar troops, as well as the Emperor and the Baron Harkonnen. All are ready to loot Arrakis. Paul waits for a sandstorm to start the battle for Arrakis. He plans to blow up the shield wall when the Emperor's ships have landed, blow up the nose of their ships, and have the Fremen fight the Sardaukar. Before the main battle starts, Paul learns that Sietch Tabr has been raided. Leto, Paul's son, was killed during the raid, and Aaliyah is captured by the troops. Jessica and Chani were luckily at the city and escaped capture and death. Aaliyah is presented to the Emperor and the Baron. The Emperor's truthsayer, Gaius Helen Mohiam, is present. Aaliyah taunts Mohiam and the Baron, stating that Paul will kill them all. The Emperor threatens to destroy Paul. However, Aaliyah, using a Gom Jabbar, kills the Baron Harkonnen and suddenly escapes as the attack begins. The Emperor's Sardaukar lose against the Fremen forces riding on the backs of sandworms. Paul sends a captured Sardaukar to the Emperor for the terms of surrender. The Emperor accepts and arrives to speak with Paul. Hawat, slowly dying from the poison administered by the Baron, is instructed to kill Paul with a poison needle. However, Hawat refuses and dies in Paul's arms. Foyed Ratha asks for a duel against Paul. Paul accepts and wins despite Foyed Ratha using a poison blade that slows the muscles of wherever it strikes. Paul then tells the Emperor that he shall marry his daughter if he is to live. Princess Irulan instructs the Emperor and Mahayam that this is what she has trained to do. The Emperor accepts the deal, however Paul states that Chani will be his real wife. Dune takes the reader on quite the adventure. This book is a cornerstone of the sci-fi genre and has been referenced in a bunch of different media. It's honestly really fun. For example, in Star Wars, when Obi-Wan Kenobi first talks to Luke about his father, he mentions spice runners. Even in the new Boba Fett show, they have a scene where Boba and the Tusken Raiders take out a train together carrying a spice drug. I do have some problems with Dune, one being that a lot of readers have a hard time grasping all the jargon used in the beginning of the book. I agree, as the story moves along fairly quickly and doesn't spend too much time hammering in every concept and language used to describe it. Further into the book, this problem subsides as your brain adapts to the jargon used, but I completely understand new readers' confusion at the beginning of Dune. I watched the Dune movie first and recommend new readers of Dune to give it a watch before reading the book. The movie gives enough material to not be totally confused when starting the book, but also leaves plenty of really good material to explore, specifically the motivations for Dr. Yue and some of the political drama going on in between the houses. You gain access into the minds of Jessica and Paul and also a better understanding of the political subtleties. One of the best aspects of Dune is the incredible ecological work done in world-building Dune. The ecosystem is well thought out and really brings out the harshness of Dune and makes for a really exciting environment for a sci-fi novel. Frank Herbert was an avid environmentalist and apparently spent 5 years building the ecology, and it really shows when they describe the water capture system or the sang plankton the worms eat, or even how Perdokines brought new animal and plant life to Arrakis. One of the best chapters in the book is ironically the Appendix 1, where Frank Herbert explains the ecology of Dune and elaborates on Perdokines' story. This chapter brings a lot of context to Dune and better explains Liet Kynes' death and the relationship he had with his father. I really liked Jessica as a character. I really enjoyed her rebellion against the Bene Gesserit. Upon finding out about their breeding program, I was kind of grossed out by this. I like that Jessica rebels against this and has a male child despite the wishes of the Bene Gesserit. I think it's part of why Paul is rebellious and is willing to take risk. A lot of the time, the Emperor, the Baron, and the Bene Gesserit are pretty much taking the safe route if they can. Paul sort of goes balls to the wall and isn't afraid to duel Jameis or ride sandworms. It's a nice touch, especially considering his Kwisatz Haderach powers of reading the future. This gives him a huge edge in the story and at times takes the stakes away from Paul's victory. However, when Paul doesn't know whether or not he will live, it really brings stakes back into the story. It makes the reader curious to see what might happen. Jessica also teaches Paul the skills of the Bene Gesserit. This is another active rebellion. This act really helps Paul's ability reading people's emotions and helps his ascent to the throne. Oftentimes, I believe that Paul's victory is really more of Jessica's victory, considering how much Paul is taught by her and helped through the journey with her advice and assistance. She's easily one of my favorite characters in the book. Paul himself is a decent character. He has a fun journey throughout the book, going from the comfort of Caladan to becoming a desert prophet, but I do feel at times he is sort of the Jyn Erso of this book. His character arc is really pushed by external events and not necessarily his own will. For example, he is the product of years of genetic work giving him his powers. Additionally, the Bene Gesserit already implanted the myth of a messiah on Arrakis, leading to his acceptance into the firmament as a religious leader fairly easily. And also, Paul wasn't responsible for the decision to come to Arrakis. All of these lead to him sort of feeling carried for the first half of the book. It really isn't until the last half of the book that we see him start to make more decisions, but at that point they seem more like a consequence from the earlier book's events and feels like he is just guiding himself to the end of the story. He does suffer for having his power, which is something I personally like, as I like watching characters go through a struggle. He envisions a jihad in his name and tries his best to get an outcome avoiding religious murder, but it's really a minor plot and he suffers more in adapting to Arrakis' harsh environment. In the end, it all falls into place fairly easy for Paul and that he doesn't go through a massive character arc. I also felt at times that the story was not entirely sci-fi. Admittedly, upon first viewing of Dune, I assumed it was going to be some crappy political drama. Granted, this is fairly true. But I was pleasantly surprised by the cool interweaving of concepts and unique groups. The best sci-fi elements stem from the Bene Gesserit's powers or the mystery of the guild members. The most exciting elements come from Frank Herbert's interweaving of groups and the trickery each one uses to gain power. The shields and lasguns are a minor sci-fi addition, but they do end up becoming a bit of a plot hole, where any person with a lasgun who shoots a shield could potentially annihilate a whole planet, or cause a small explosion. It makes you wonder why some of the smaller groups in Dune don't use this to their advantage. Instead of a sci-fi book, the best way to imagine Dune is sort of like Game of Thrones, except with some more mystical sci-fi elements. Most of the story takes place on Arrakis and doesn't spend a lot of time exploring interstellar travel, and ends up again feeling like a medieval book where everybody uses knives. Overall, there are still a ton of great parts of Dune. It's mentioned a bunch in other sci-fi creations and does introduce some fun concepts for artists to build off of. It doesn't have the best character arcs, but still has a really satisfying ending. The world building is excellent, and the book plays with the world and groups in fun ways. I would still recommend an interested reader to delve into the book, but be wary of the first half of the book and give yourself time to fully get placed into the world. Still, I enjoyed this book and will probably look into reading further into the series. My score, 8 out of 10. Thank you for watching my video. This video is an experiment to see if something like this is possible. I ended up really enjoying it. I plan on reading and reviewing Dune Messiah as well, and maybe delving into the Invincible comic book series. If you have any book suggestions, feel free to put them in the comments. Again, thank you.